case. He says, Solomon, I'm going to give you what you asked for. You are going to be the wisest king ever. Wow. And not only am I going to give you what you asked for, those things that you didn't ask for, I'm going to give you those too. I'm going to shower you with blessings. You're going to be the wealthiest king. You're going to be the most well-known king. You're going to outlive your enemies. You're going to be the wisest man around, and everyone's going to know it. Fast forward to the point where it's 2011, many millennium since Solomon walked this earth, and he is still considered to be the wisest man who ever lived, despite all his problems. And let's look at some of the stuff that happened to him. I want to read to, let's just jump to verse 4, 29 through 30. And I'm going to read that to you. You don't have to move there, turn there if you don't want to, but write it down. It says, and God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure and breadth of mind, like the sand on the seashore. So that Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt.
Wow.
Wow. How much sand is on the seashore? I don't know. It's somewhere between a lot and a whole heck of a lot, right? Yeah. And more than that. And God said God made Solomon wiser than all the wisdom of Egypt. Egypt was like the big people, the big place. It was like the USA of the world. Everybody looked to it and honored it and were in awe of their stuff. And apparently all the wisdom of the world came out of Egypt. And God says, you are wiser than Egypt. The fortune cookies were made in Egypt. Okay? Dr. Seuss books came out of Egypt. That kind of wisdom. The wisdom they all admired and respected. Egypt. And God said, Solomon, you're going to be wiser than you are wiser than the wisdom of Egypt. Amazing. Amazing. People everywhere. I like the story that shows up in the end of chapter 3. See, I have these broken down in points. The first one was that he was wise enough to ask for wisdom. The second one, to show his wisdom, was his wisdom in dealing with people. Solomon knew how to play people. He knew how to deal with people. I wish I had this wisdom. The story at the end of chapter 3. I won't read it to you, but I'll tell you. How's that sound? Want to hear me tell the story or read it? If I read it, I'm going to tell it to you anyway, so I'm just going to... Apparently, there's these two prostitutes that lived in a house together. One of them had a child. But 3 days later, the other one had a child. Got to build up to it. Got to build up to it there. And the one that had the child, the second woman that had the child, she slept on her kid and killed it. It's not a very good mother. But the woman was cunning enough, conniving and evil enough to try to swap babies with the other woman. But everybody knows a mama knows her own baby. Your mom knows your voice. Your mom knows who you are. I'm sitting, you can tell in Walmart, when you're in Walmart, there's a bunch of moms around, and you go, hey, Mom! Not every mother turns around because that's not her kid's voice. Right? That's not my child. I know my child. And this woman these two women were having a dispute over whose baby the live one was. The woman who lost her child saying, it's mine, it's mine. The other one saying, no, it's mine, it's my child. She can't have it. I gave birth to that child. I spent 12 hours in labor for that child. I was up screaming half the night with that child. It's mine. So they brought the dispute to the king. And Solomon sat there and he listened, and he was patient with both of the women. Just tough. And he was sitting there listening and saying, okay, I have an idea. Why don't we take the baby and slice it down the middle? Then each of you can have half. Okay. Not, you won't see that on Judge Mathis or Judge Judy or Judge Wapner would never say anything like that. But Solomon said, let's do that. And the woman whose baby had died said, yes, do that. That'll be good. That's fair. And the other woman said, no, don't. Here, let her have the child. It's hers. She take care of it. And Solomon ruled, and he says, give the baby to the woman who wanted to give it up. Because that's her child. Because a mother would not want to see her own baby sliced down the middle. Because that's just gross and cruel. And that's just wrong. Up until that time. And that showed that he knew people. He knew people's hearts. He knew how people existed. He knew how people worked. And Solomon looked, and he knew how to successfully settle disputes. This was not the first dispute. This was not the last dispute that they brought to him. They came and brought to him all sorts of problems, and Solomon was able to handle all of them in one form or another. He knew how to deal with people. There's not, in the rule of Solomon, for the 40 years, there's not one story of war that broke out. There is not one tale of skirmish of any type, because Solomon knew how to handle people. David's life, David's career was known as a warrior king, as one who would go out and he'd fight people and he'd win, right? He's the man's man. He could win wars. Solomon was a different type of king, and he handled people. Chapter 10 of Kings talks about Sheba, the queen of Sheba, and how she came with all her officials because she had heard about the stories of King Solomon. She heard about his wisdom, and she said, I want to know what this is. I want to see if he is as wise as he says he is, as people say he is. And she brought all her questions, and for days they sat there and they asked questions, and Solomon answered questions. And Solomon answered every question she had. Wow. It's like reading the Encyclopedia Britannica from cover to cover. She had that many questions. And she says in verse 8 of chapter 10, verse 6 of chapter 10, and she said to the king, the report was true that I heard in my own land of your words and wisdom, that I did not believe your reports until I came and my own eyes had seen it. And behold, the half was not told to me. Your wisdom and prosperity surpass the reports that I heard. Wisdom doesn't also stop with not knowing that you know nothing. Wisdom is also, how do we deal with people? How do we deal with people? How do we emulate this wisdom? How do we see what in people? I don't deal well with people. I don't deal well with people. I have cut people off. I have hurt people emotionally, physically. Well, no, not physically. I have ruined relationships. I don't always know how to deal with people. If you're honest with yourself, you don't always know how to deal with people either. But Solomon had a grasp on it. He knew people. So what his wisdom was, he was wise enough to ask for wisdom. He was wise in his dealings with people, and he was wise enough to put God first in his life. God was more important. In chapters 5 through 8, go home and read these. Solomon builds for God a temple. He builds a place for God to live in the center of Jerusalem. Because he realized that people needed a place to worship God. God needed to be the forefront of people's minds. God needed to be the center of society. And the temple became the central point of Jewish society, of Jewish culture, of Jewish religion. It was at the temple that Solomon built. And he was wise in dealing with that too. Because he used the people of Israel. Chapter 5, verse 13 says that he hired the workers of Israel. Not only did that give them ownership in the temple, but it also boosted their morale and boosted their economy. He used the best supplies. He used the cedars of Lebanon. He used the best trees for the best wood. He used the best gold. He used silver, although he used more gold than silver because silver wasn't that important back then. It wasn't as important as gold. He used the finest linens. He used the best of the best because he knew that God deserved the best. He tended to every physical detail.